There probably would have been an incident very similar to Springwood, Ohio's incident. There had been a lynching or something happened because people don't put up with that. I mean, there was another story. They quoted in the Boondock Saints. I mean, Kitty Genovese, little girl, being beaten and stabbed to death, screaming for help in broad daylight. No one came out of the apartment buildings to help them. That's documented. That's a real case. She was stabbed, I want to say I read someplace like over 40 or 50 times and cried out for help, and no one came out to help. People watched at the windows while this girl was killed. And that shows you what Wyndell was talking about, our willful ignorance and wanting to just pretend like shit doesn't happen. It does. When we pretend like it doesn't exist, it gives them more power. That's what they feed off of. They're power hungry. They're maniacs in every sense of the word. They're social parasites. They're social predators. Like he said. So and Fish was a perfect example. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing.
You talked about the Hannibal Lecter comparison. I think the reason why he was so scary is because of that invasiveness that you brought up, is the fact that he could analyze you, figure out who you are, and take advantage of your weaknesses.
Oh, absolutely.
He was just a scary guy.
Like, you got sheep's shoes and a mid-grade perfume, but I know what you're really about, Clarice. Why don't you tell me about, your uncles and aunts, this and that, and don't lie to me because I'll know. It's that invasiveness, that just blunt, I'm going to get in your head and screw with you, and there's nothing you can do about it because that's what I'm good at doing. I mean, Lecter was he was a psychologist. That's what he did, studying the human mind. And to manipulate the human mind is quite a feat. And again, I put that right up there with rape and murder. To manipulate someone, especially Albert Fish, it really made me mad. He manipulated a lot of mentally challenged people, kids who had, problems, and didn't know what was happening to them until it was too late. And he craved on people he considered weak. And he just was awful. I mean, he's one of the worst serial killers. I spent so much time studying him in college. It's like I had to step away because the further I got into it, the more that I felt like I could understand that darkness, and it scared me because it's like I'm reading about this, and I'm sitting here eating dinner, reading about him chopping a girl up and putting her in a stew and cooking her for 4 hours with onions. I'm reading about this like it's not.
I did it at breakfast. I know what you mean. I do. I really do. A few weeks ago, I sat there, ate cereal, watched the documentary that John Borowski did. Cheap plug. We're going to have him on next week. And I was just sitting there, like, disgusted, but at the same time intrigued,
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what we said, and I'll stay away from the Freddy Krueger thing after this, but it goes back to what we said. People that relish being evil and admit that they have a darkness within them, we're all admitting we have the capability. He said it himself. Wyndell said it. It's not hard to kill someone. It's not hard to go to that dark place. And maybe that's why I always kind of like Batman as my hero, because though he could be grim and brutal at times, he knew there was a line, and he drew a line later in his crime-fighting career that he wouldn't kill. I mean, unless absolutely necessary. Even then, I mean, look at the Joker. That thing should have ended many, 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 many years ago. But, and it's that same thing with serial killers. They admit they have a darkness within them. They find they excel at something. After being told that they're not going to be anything, they decide to be something. They find their calling. And that's part of what I write about in my book is, Krueger finds his calling and realizes that's his place in the world is to rid the world of these people that he deems, unfit to have this life that he never had. So, yeah, I mean, it all fits in together. Albert Fish, Bundy, Gacy, Freddy Krueger, all of them. Andre Chikatilo, they all fit the same mold,
There is a justification for their actions that they use. Albert Fish, and I brought it up earlier, was religion. Again, extreme religion can be scary, and I think in his case that was manifested with what he did. He thought he was sacrificing for God or whatever the hell else. I'm not even sure I believe that. I know he said it, you know what I mean? I'm not sure that it was the truth.
That's scary. He probably believed it.
Yeah.
They do. They become like they're delusional. And what's scary is they're so delusional they believe it, and then they try to make other people believe it. So then it's like a delusion becomes a disease, and it overtakes them, and that's why I don't disagree with what they did. He was insane. He was an insane person, but he still deserved to die for what he did. I mean,
I think that all the time about certain people. So what if they're crazy? They don't need to be breathing our air.
Well, shit, I guess I need to stop calling into the show, don't I?
Well, you haven't murdered anybody yet, so I think you're okay.
No, but in this book I've witnessed 20 kids murdered, you know, and
yeah.
Whew.
Well, just keep it in the book and you'll be okay. You see, that's how you have to do it. You have to kind of
Right. It's all
men are good at compartmentalizing. That's something that we have a skill at, you know. You can compartmentalize it and you'll be okay. That's why, you know, you have those situations where you can do that. You know, I talked next week. We're going to be talking to John Borowski about, you know, the Albert Fish documentary, the H.H. Holmes documentary, serial killer culture, and that's something I wanted to get into, Blake. And I know we've talked about this time and time again. Joe Coleman actually owns one of the letters from Albert Fish, which I think is kind of really cool, but also really morbid, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's really interesting. What do you think about Albert Fish being one of the most quotable serial killers of all time? And you got Ted Bundy, you've got H.H. Holmes had a couple, Panzram had a ton, but right there, Albert Fish has to be one of the most quotable, right?
Right, he is, and that's because it's weird. He didn't have he wasn't very far in his education, in his studies when he quit school, and I mean, he still was able to pull together these remarkable phrases, and it's not even what he said, it's the quality of how he said it.
Mm-hmm.
You know? I mean, all right, I'll give you an example. What is it he said? He's talking about a little boy. I'm not going to name the child, but he's talking about cutting up this little boy. And his names for the boy's parts were just so repulsive. Like he said, monkey and his peewees. He's like, his monkey was sweet and had almost a nutty flavor, but his peewees were tough, and I couldn't chew them, so I spit them in the toilet.
Yeah.
Fucking
yeah, some of the things he said were just disgusting. And, you know, the thing about it, Blake, is that he wasn't just quotable. People, I think when they see Albert Fish quotes, they don't think they're real. These are real quotes. These aren't things that were just made up.
Right. I mean, and he said himself, I chose the boy, the 11-year-old boy, because he had the fattest ass. I mean, that was. I mean, he believed that, and he saw it, and he interpreted it as truth. So that's what makes it so shocking to us, is that we're seeing through his lens of his glasses. We're seeing into his life, and that's what makes it so repulsive. Is that, well, you know, it's exciting to him and it's repulsive to us, but at the same time, we can't look away from it. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's like a bad car crash, but, you know, I can't sit here and pretend that it didn't happen and just, you know, look away. I mean, I really, I mean, you know what? I'll tell you what, that's a good transition, Blake. But rather than us pounding home a point, I'll transition real quick into what we've been watching, okay, Blake? Because I can't remember. I think it was last week. I talked to Connie about Ichi the Killer, which is a Japanese horror movie. I don't even know that it's horror, but, I mean, it's like a dark comedy.
Takahashi Miike directed it. He directed Audition, which I own. Yeah.
Well, it was pretty badass, okay? So, and of course, Connie loves Cannibal Holocaust, okay?
Okay.
I've never seen Cannibal Holocaust, and if I have, I was a little kid and I don't remember it. So, I have Shudder. I have a trial of Shudder, which is a kind of like Netflix, but it's horror. So, I pop in Cannibal Holocaust, and I have to tell you, Blake, the cannibalism didn't bother me, but there were some sequences in that movie that were literally about to make me hurl.
Wow. I've never seen Cannibal Holocaust, to my recollection, so I'll have to check that out. I have a real problem with some of my horror films trying to get the wife to watch. Like last night we watched one of our favorites. We cuddled together. I know. We cuddled during Cabin Fever.
Yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah,
love
Dr.
that
Mambo,
movie.
Man, Dr. Mambo. But, yeah, there's a few that I own that she won't watch, like I Spit on Your Grave. She can't handle that. Or Last House on the Left. Like, there's just a few that she won't do. So that's why I started looking into the Japanese stuff. And I'll tell you what, I'd love to do a show on Tomi. Are you familiar with Tomi?
I'm not. And this is what I told Connie. I don't know Japanese horror that well because anything that's been translated to American horror, I don't like that much. Like, I like Ring, okay. I don't like The Grudge. I didn't like Dark Water. So I never really got into Japanese horror. But, I mean, if it's as good as what she says, I'll check it out.
Well, my wife is kind of an expert on these things. She loves foreign horror, especially Japanese stuff like Wishing Stairs and Ju-On and Ringu and some of these others. Well, she introduced me to Tomi. Tomi is live action, and Tomi is essentially a very sexy, manipulative Japanese version of Freddy Krueger. And she's brutal. She's brutal. She is I have never sat through a movie and went, wow, this is really fucking disturbing. Like, for me to say that is a testament into itself that I tell you what, it's so bad that I didn't finish it. It was so gory and horrific, I didn't finish it.
That's crazy.
Didn't finish this movie, so I recommend we do a show. And if you decide to put together a Japanese show on Tomi, I will finish it. I will sit down with some booze or something, and I will finish this because literally it was creepy. The music, the way she looked at the victims, her manipulation, and it just. And Audition is the same way. Audition is like Japan's answer to a female version of Patrick Bateman. This bitch is fucking crazy. Okay. You have to see it. If you haven't seen Audition, it's one of the few movies that made John Landis nauseous to his stomach when he saw it.
Nice.
Takashi Miike, the same person who directed Ichi the Killer. So,
only one scene in that movie really bothered me in Ichi the Killer. So it was the tongue, of course, which we talked about last week. But hey, Blake, this was actually a point I wanted to jump back to real quick about Fish and our guest tonight, Wyndell Watkins. The manipulation aspect of it. I talked about the Hannibal Lecter thing. What about this, too? We talked about pedophiles, child molesters, things like that, how they have the same characteristics of the serial killer. What about a terrorist? Okay, a terrorist is just as manipulative. They get groups of people to do the same type of thing, almost like a Jim Jones. They're all doing the same shit. There's a manipulation there that takes place that's no different than a serial killer, really.
That's true. I mean, the manipulation is what makes them, some of these killers like Fish so remarkably effective, is the fact that they use manipulation. It becomes a tool in their kill set, for lack of a better term. It becomes that becomes part of them, and the manipulation aspect, to be able to have that kind of mental control. I think a serial killer knows if they can maneuver you mentally, then physically maneuvering you won't be hard at all, because the hard part is psychologically being able to overshadow you and make you subservient. That's what makes them so scary, is because once they get you mentally, being physically is not a problem, because they've already tormented you, they've already broken into your psyche, and they've already manipulated you, they've already raped you, for lack of a better word. They've already raped your senses, so you're already theirs. Now it's just a matter of finishing the deal, sealing the deal, putting a bow on the present. So that's sort of what it is. The manipulation is very powerful with Fish. I think he was probably one of the better ones at it. Also, because of his appearance, that helped too with his manipulation.
They all had their kryptonite too. Like Ted Bundy, men were his kryptonite, really. I mean, he was able to manipulate women who were, college age, easily influenced, easily, distracted, things like that. Things that women that weren't maybe of the age yet where they had the reasoning to kind of look past his charming demeanor, things like that. His was that. Albert Fish was anybody younger than him with half a brain. You know what I mean? And there were different people that were the kryptonite to these people. And Albert Fish, obviously, it was the detective that busted him.
Right, yeah, and that's something else that I wanted to address. It's very much like John Dillinger. What is it, Mervyn? I can't remember his name. The guy that pursued him. William King pursued Fish, and he was on the verge of retirement. You know, he had been a lifelong good cop and was, you know, on his way to